Hi, I'm Miscellaneous Stories, and this is a miniseries by John Wayne Gacy, The Devil in Disguise. A successful businessman who likes to dress up as a clown turns out to be a serial killer and sexual rapist with a whole cemetery under his house where 33 people are buried. The action of the series, based on real events, begins on December 11, 1978 in Chicago. On Zero-Day, Elizabeth Piest, on her birthday, wants to pick up her son Rob from the drugstore where he works, but it turns out that the young man is not there when he later does not come home. The family searches the surrounding blocks, but to no avail. On the first day, the Chitapists contact the police about the disappearance of their son. The case falls to Detective Joseph Kozenczak, clarifying just in case that the teenager did not quarrel with his parents and did not run away. Kozenczak assigns Officer Rafael Tovar to handle the investigation. First of all, Tovar goes to the drugstore, where he questions the colleague of the missing guy. She talks about the construction contractor, who offered Rob a job. According to the pharmacist, the guy went to an interview with him. Rob wanted to talk to him. He took my jacket and left. In the evening, a police officer visits this contractor named John Wayne Gacy. He talks on the phone, citing the death of his uncle, who just found out, asks to reschedule the conversation for another time. He also denies that he knew the missing Rob and had any business with him. Tovar, before leaving, invites the man to come to the station. On the second day, Tovar reports to the chief about the conversation. He is sure that John Gacy is lying and asks for a warrant to search his house. Then the suspect is invited to the station for questioning. It turns out that the man had previously been in prison on charges of molesting a minor, but he was released early. According to him, the whole case was a big mistake and the result of slander. After that, his wife left him. I had a wife and 2 children. I haven't seen them since. Well, the hell I got involved with him. While Gacy interrogated, 2 officers Fanholm and Albrecht go to his house to search in the attic. They find paraphernalia for sexual games, with a slight touch of BDSM, but nothing that would indicate the kidnapping of Rob Piest. However, Tovar's instinct tells him that something is wrong with John Gacy, and he asks to assign constant surveillance to him, in the hope that he will slip up somewhere. On the third day, Fanholm and Albrecht begin to surveillance Gacy. At first, he does not pay much attention to the constant presence of the police. They do not interfere too much with his construction and repair work. At the head of a team of young construction workers, John even waves affably to his spy at every opportunity. His partners follow him relentlessly for several days, at public meetings, near stores, pubs, and just on the street. Then Gacy's work van is confiscated. Then he calls his friend, lawyer Sam Amirante, to discuss a way to get rid of the annoying police attention. Amirante turns to Kozenczak directly, but the detective refuses to simply remove surveillance. They have an investigation here, but it's not moving forward. Why does Elizabeth, distraught with grief, personally visit John Gacy? But he's not home. Kozenczak has to visit the spies to ask them not to do it again. If the builder is guilty, they will arrest him according to the law. Realizing that he can't get rid of the spies, John Gacy invites the officers to his place for dinner. During the conversation, he makes a pleasant impression. He talks about his successes, his acquaintance with First Lady Rosalind Carter, the wife of President Jimmy Carter. He also admits that as a hobby, he performs as a clown at various events, including visits to sick children. In between, Gacy admits that no one takes clowns seriously. They can get away with any crime. Damn, they can kill a person and not get caught. After all, no one suspects a clown. When Fanholm goes to the toilet, he smells a familiar stench from the basement ventilation. Later, he reports to Officer Tovar that it smells like a corpse. There is likely a corpse hidden under the suspect's house. This suspicion is enough to obtain an expanded search warrant. Gacy himself, at this time, visits his lawyer in person to admit that he gave false testimony to the police. In fact, he invited the missing Rob to his home. The conversation lasts all night, after which Sam, leaving the building in the morning, asks the police officers on duty to shoot out the tires if his client is going anywhere. He can't say anything more without violating professional ethics. Waking up with a hangover after a night of confession, John Gacy drives home, led by the police. Meanwhile, a search is being conducted in his house. Officer Tovar, going down to the basement, finds a human skeleton buried in the ground. Following the first body of a young man, a second is found. However, the degree of their decomposition indicates that this cannot be the recently missing robber. Kozenczak informs the teenager's parents that the suspect has been detained, but the fate of their son is still unclear. The suspect himself is brought to the station, where he and his lawyer are waiting for the prosecutor. Amirante outlines the situation to his subordinate. In order to avoid being fried in the electric chair, he must demand a medical examination, to pretend to be a schizo and make a deal with the investigation, admitting guilt. This way you can get off with life sentences. John Gacy refuses from such a plan. But when the police arrive with a prosecutor named Bill Kunkle, the prosecution reports that 2 bodies were found under the house and offers the defendant cooperation. Despite his previous words and Amirante's advice to remain silent, Gacy suddenly agrees to reveal the location of the roboticist's body. You're here, right? You work for me, remember? To do this, the entire team goes to Gacy's house, where forensic experts are operating, led by Tovar. Upon arrival, it turns out that the remains of another person have been found. The number of victims has increased to 3. Tovar almost takes it out on the owner of the house to get him to confess how many bodies are buried on his property. Kozenczak sends a subordinate to the station to cool off and sort out a pile of found things that are evidence. John Gacy leads the police to the garage, where he marks the area on the concrete floor with black paint. The body of John Butkovich is buried there. The guy worked for him, but one day, according to the killer, he showed up drunk for his paycheck. Gacy handcuffed him and put a rope noose around his neck to calm him down. But in the end, he overdid it, and he suffocated. Then he used the hole he dug to hide the body. At this time, Carrie, the fucking sister of the missing teenager, leaves the house and goes to the bank to visit Patty Schick. Patty's brother Johnny disappeared 3 years ago. Carrie fears that his body may be resting in John Gacy's basement, which Patty doesn't want to believe. She is sure that her brother ran away from home when his parents found out about his sexual orientation. Officer Tovar finds a ring from a local school among the evidence. He goes with him to the educational institution to check the list of students. Among them is Johnny Schick, who disappeared in 1975. With this information, the policeman goes to Patty's home to tell the sad news. John Gacy offers the police a ride to the bridge over the local river. On the way, he says that it is not he who is to blame for all these murders, but Jack Henley. It was Henley who killed gay teenagers after having sex with them, and Gacy only buried the bodies. According to him, Jack was a policeman and taught him to use chemicals to speed up decomposition. Henley also wanted to clean the streets of immoral filth, but Gacy himself immediately admits that Jack Henley is one of the parts of him. Personalities neighboring with a businessman, politician, and clown. There are John Podriachik, John Politician, John Clown, Jack Tforitzla. Arriving at the bridge, the killer tells the detective that he dumped the bodies of his victims from here directly into the water. Among them was Rob Piest. When journalists arrive, smelling the sweet scent of a crime sensation, prosecutor Kunkle tells the amateur lawyer that there will be no deal. John Gacy needs to be fried in the electric chair. At the station, the detainee agrees to continue cooperation and asks for a piece of paper and a pencil. He promised to draw a map of the buried bodies. Detective Kozenczak goes to the Piest family to break the tragic news. A man has confessed to killing their son. Police are holding a press conference to tell reporters and the world about the arrest of John Gacy, his confession, and the ongoing identification investigation. To make it easier to excavate the bodies, forensic scientists are opening up the wooden floor in the house. Police and coroners are also examining unknown bodies pulled from the river downstream from the spot where Gacy indicated. They find underwear in the throat of one of them. The killer strangled the victim with his own underwear. Amirante's lawyer is tormented by a moral and ethical dilemma. Should he defend a serial killer who has already confessed to several murders? But in addition to moral torment, this high-profile case will make him famous, which will subsequently have a positive impact on his career. Realizing that he cannot cope on his own, Amirante calls colleagues to invite them to share the heavy burden of legal bureaucracy. But everyone unanimously refuses, not wanting to get dirty in an obviously losing case. John Gacy is visited in prison by his mother and sister to pray for him. Even the fact that he confessed to the murders does not make his mother doubt him. Next comes the lawyer, puzzled by how to save his client's life. He insists on a psychiatric examination at the famous Cuckoo's Nest Hospital. Meanwhile, Elizabeth and Carrie Pista visit the Shikovs under the close attention of reporters. They want to support each other in such a difficult time. Dissatisfied citizens, including Butkovich's father, have gathered near Gacy's house. He repeatedly told the police that he suspects the builder for whom his son worked, but they did nothing. Tovar is forced to calm the upset man, but also draw conclusions from his words. After analyzing the available data on Gacy, the officer shares shocking information with the kid. If he had not been released early on the first charge, then there would have been no murders. This means that the blame lies not with the local police, but with the prison system that released the maniac. At the court hearing, Amirante tries his best to shield his client, appealing to his social significance for the local community and all the good deeds he did in between serial murders. All this is necessary for a successful petition to appoint an examination in a closed medical facility. This will save John Gacy from the imprisonment of a prisoner who wanted justice. After the hearing, prosecutor Kunkle reminds his colleague in a private conversation that this case is impossible to win. His client will be sentenced and executed. Meanwhile, forensic scientists are debating whether John Gacy, the current champion among maniacs with 25 victims, will beat him in the number of found bodies and proven murders. If Gacy was not lying, he killed more. All in U.S. history. In addition, the cops, having learned that almost all the victims were gay, sharply cooled in their compassion. Digging in the ground with the others, the compassionate goods are horrified to realize that the killer sometimes buried 2 victims at a time. Returning home, the American sees that his father's car has been scratched by citizens unhappy with his defense of Gacy. John himself calls a lawyer from prison to personally apologize to his father for this incident. Although the old man does not want to talk to the killer, his son hands him the phone. Later, when the guard brings the prisoner a Christmas treat, he asks how he copes with his victims. He looks like a fat weakling. With the help of a guy, Gacy, with his hand through the food hole, clearly demonstrates how to make a choke knot. He learned this technique while being a Boy Scout. The Kozenczak goods go to Chicago police headquarters to talk to the police chief. They are confident that the press will soon find out that the police have been ignored the accusations against Gacy when difficult teenagers disappeared, and they will blow this into an epic-scale scandal. The police chief counters that every year thousands of teenagers disappear, run away from home for various reasons. Most return soon, some do not. And matching the disappearance of children in different areas of the city with a single previously convicted citizen is a matter of more luck than skill. To acquire a base for identifying the dug-up bodies, the police request cases of all missing teenagers and young men over the past few years. But when they look through them, they fear that they will not find anything. Most of the cases contain only a missing persons report. There are no more materials, because the police did not conduct an investigation. Amirante enlists the help of a colleague named Bob Mata, who was inspired by the appearance in court. Together they hire Dr. Hilly to examine the client's mental state. First, the prisoner talks about his difficult childhood, strict judgment, avoiding physical violence, and the habit of stealing women's underwear. At some point, the conflict with his father reached a decisive phase, after which Gacy left home. He moved to Las Vegas, where he got a job as a cleaner at a funeral home. At his new job, the guy discovered new addictions, a craving for male corpses. During the conversation, Dr. Hilly lays out various things from her purse onto the table. The mess she's created infuriates Gacy. Before continuing the conversation, the patient asks her to clean up the mess. What a mess. Could you clean up? Remove pathological passion for order is also a symptom of an unhealthy psyche. Returning from Vegas, John got a job and started a family. Thanks to the patronage of his father-in-law, he got a job at a fast food restaurant chain. One day, his father visited him at work to say that he was proud of his son. He became a worthy member of society. Gacy was proud of his father's praise, but did not stop there. He joined a local club of political activists, where he revealed himself as a talented organizer. Thanks to the screenings of erotic films he organized at the club, the influx of young people increased. At one of the club's events, he met a teenager, Donald Voorhees, whom he once invited to visit. The viewing of an erotic film ended in intimacy, after which the teenager reported rape. Gacy was arrested and sentenced to 10 years. He was released for good behavior after a year and a half. Since then, he has developed an open hostility to gays. He did not consider himself one of them, preferring to call himself bisexual, and he becomes furious when a psychiatrist confuses terms. After the trial, his wife left him, taking the children. But what's worse, John felt that he had let his father down, and he never had time to apologize. He died while his son was in prison for sodomy. Soon after his parole, he commits his first murder, according to him, in self-defense. After finishing the conversation, Dr. Lee reports to the lawyers that he diagnosed Gacy with a whole range of various mental disorders. She is ready to testify in court that he is insane. At this time, Detective Kozenczak learned that the maniac had been accused of sexual assault twice during the reporting period. But the police took no action. They didn't even inform the parole board, and such sloppiness can no longer be put on the brakes. In 1979, Gacy's lawyers build a defense tactic on the fact that he is insane, a mentally ill person with a split personality, who does not realize what he is doing. John himself does not like this. He repeatedly argues with somersaults, trying to improve his own image in the eyes of Gacy. Wants to portray himself as an unfairly treated victim, while lawyers try to save him from the electric chair. Forensic scientists led by Officer Tovar have dug up 27 bodies under John Gacy's house. Despite the fact that this number corresponds to the one indicated by the killer himself on the map, Tovar wants to continue excavating. He suspects that there may be more victims. Kozenczak has to order him to stop his obsessive archaeology. Kozenczak himself goes to Jeff Rignall, one of Gacy's victims. However, he does not want to talk to the police after they ignored his appeal the first time. After this, detective and prosecutor Kunkle interrogate David, an employee of Gacy's construction company, who has lived in the house with Boss for a long time. The guy admits that at first Boss made a purely positive impression, gave him a job, paid well, and later allowed him to rent one of the empty rooms for cheap. In addition, he often threw parties with alcohol and drugs. According to David, he had no suspicions about his manic tendencies. Even when the boss ordered him to dig a hole in the cellar for an extra fee, he didn't suspect anything. However, the prosecutor, playing the role of an evil policeman during the interrogation, doesn't believe the worker. They go together to Gacy's house, where forensic experts left dozens of numbered holes. Each plate means a murdered victim. Then, under pressure from Kunkle, David admits that the boss once raped him and, intimidating him with his connections, ordered him to keep quiet about it. Then Kozenczak goes to Robert Donnelly, another victim of John Gacy's violence. The guy also contacted the police, but to no avail. Now, having learned that he got off easy compared to other victims, he is ready to cooperate. After journalists blew this story out of proportion, Donnelly understood that sooner or later his old incident would surface. The hero of the occasion himself in this time, having obtained, with the help of personal charm, and the ability to negotiate, painting equipment, he paints pictures of clowns in the cell. The story returns to December 20, 1978. The 9th day of the disappearance of Rob Piest. A drunk John Gacy stumbles into the office of lawyer Sam Amirante, where he demands another drink, drowning his sorrows. The killer begins to tell how he sank to such a life, that he is suspected of kidnapping a teenager, and the police are watching him around the clock. In particular, how he committed his first murder. Activation of the flashback takes the plot back to the very beginning of 1972. After celebrating the new year, John says goodbye to his new girlfriend. At the bus station, he notices a lonely guy. It turns out to be Tim McCoy. The teenager missed the last bus, and now he has to wait all night for the next one. Gacy offers to give the guy a tour of the city, after which he invites him to his place for a drink and a bite to eat. At home, the host unobtrusively persuades the guests to have sex, and quite successfully. However, waking up in the morning in bed, John sees guest entering the room with a knife. Deciding that he was going to kill him and rob him, Gacy fights back. Taking the knife away, he inflicts fatal wounds on the guy. Only after leaving the bedroom, smeared in blood, the man sees breakfast in the kitchen and realizes the guest was just cooking. John receives a call from his girlfriend. She is returning home. In a panic, he begins to cover his tracks, wash away the blood, removes the dirty clothes and underwear, and also throws McCoy's body into the basement, with a start, so to speak. But this is not the end of his series of confessions to the lawyer. Gacy recalls the 73rd year. He already had a construction company, and one day his namesake, John Butkovich, came to hire a worker. The guy in general immediately liked the experienced pervert. He introduced him to his second wife, after which he showed the garage, where he planned to set up a room for men's entertainment. Butkovich worked for Gacy for 2 years, until he quarreled with him over the delay in wages. Then the boss handcuffed him to a pole in the garage. The killer wanted to let the guy go, but had barely uncuffed him when the young man attacked him, Fighting back, Gacy kills him too. From that moment on, he has two hobbies left. In addition to his favorite job. In the garage, John throws parties for his employees. All young and handsome guys. In his free time, he drives the streets in search of men selling their bodies. He kills these giogolos and buries their bodies right under the house. Then, deciding that he hasn't done enough sins, John Gacy masters new hobbies. Becoming a professional clown. One day, pretending to be a police officer, he forces Robert Dannel into his car. After raping and torturing him, John lets the young man go, and he goes to the police. The cops come for the man, but he manages to get away with it. They say everything went by mutual consent, but he behaved like 3 or 2 times and began blackmailing statements to get money. Having lied that he had no previous arrests, John Gacy, he gets away with the crime as if nothing had happened. His image as a respected member of society, and the laziness of law enforcement officers played into his hands. For heaven's sake, I gave him a ride to work the next morning. After this, John's wife leaves him, which only makes him happy. Now he won't have to hide in the garage. The story of the next victim begins a week and a half before the meeting with Amirante, in the pharmacy where Rob Piest worked. Having noticed the young man during repairs, Gacy offers him double pay. The man waits in the car outside for Rob to finish his shift to discuss the details. Under the pretext of urgently needing to complete the paperwork so the guy can start in the morning, John takes him to his home. There he offers him a drink, and when he refuses, says that he works part-time as a clown. The owner shows the guest a trick with handcuffs, easily removing them with a hidden key, after which he offers to teach. Having handcuffed Rob, Gacy makes an indecent sexual proposition to the guy. When he refuses, the man becomes furious and undresses the young man. Suddenly, John comes to his senses, apologizes for what happened and removes the handcuffs. Frightened and crying, Rob gets dressed to leave, but sees that the owner has returned with a hammer and rope to show the last trick. In the morning, Rob's lifeless body, wrapped in cloth, flies off the bridge straight into the local river. February arrives. 1980. Time the multi-day trial of John Gacy. The prosecution and defense are meticulously preparing for this trial, covering the narratives they won in the press. In a face-to-face meeting at a restaurant, Amirante reminds the prosecutor that he only needs one hesitant juror out of the 12 to prevent his client from receiving the death penalty. The prosecution is also preparing its witnesses, one of whom, Jeff Rignall, did a disservice by publishing a book before the trial claiming that Gacy was mentally ill. His sanity was considered complete, so Kunkle decides to bet on David Krem, a worker who rented the defendant's room during a period of financial problems. Gacy is secretly transported from prison to court, first by a convoy to distract the press, then by a car driven by Officer Tovar. Tovar is still obsessed with the idea that more remains are buried in the killer's houses than they found in total. John Gacy is accused of 33 murders. As the trial progresses, prosecutor Kunkle attracts the relatives of the victims. Their statements before the jury should tip the scales in favor of a guilty verdict. Even Detective Kozenczak visits the Piest family to convince them to speak out on their side against the prison system and the Chicago police. Having succumbed to persuasion, Rob's parents not only testify in court, but also tell reporters at a press conference that they will file a lawsuit against the state of Iowa, where John Gacy served time. If he had not been released early for exemplary behavior, the victims could have been avoided. The Chicago police, careless and sloppy in carrying out their direct duties to protect citizens, will also come under attack. One day, it turns out that Gacy, contrary to the advice of his lawyer, filed a complaint directly with the judge, accusing the prosecution of bias against him, and his defense of improper services. The judge dismisses the complaints, but allows the defendant to decide whether to keep Amirante as a lawyer or remove the department. John decides that it is better with such a lawyer than without at all. When Tovar gives the maniac a ride to court for the last time, he asks him how many victims Gacy actually has, wanting to tease the policeman. He says that 45 is a good number, almost like 42 it's 9. May 1994, the day before the execution of serial killer and rapist John Gacy. The relatives of his victims are carefully transferred from their personal cars to a federal bus that will take them to the place of execution. As they approach the designated location, they see demonstrators on opposite sides of the road, in Creased Hill Prison, with diametrically opposed demands. Some advocate for a moratorium on the death penalty, while others chant, "Death to the clown." At the scene, those arriving are assigned to a basement, where they will await their execution. Upstairs in an auditorium overlooking the event space, the heroes of the occasion, former colleagues Kozenczak and Tovar, and prosecutor Clank meet. Clank notes that relatives will not be allowed to watch the execution. To avoid any excesses, the authorities decided to do without it. While spectators wait for midnight, when the execution is scheduled to take place, Amirante, a lawyer suffering from insomnia, listens to recordings on his answering machine. Most of them are from journalists seeking comment, but one is from John Gacy. The killer made his last call to his lawyer to dictate abstract memories of how he was renovating his house. In the basement of the prison, an employee comes out to the relatives and announces that they can go with their things to the exit. The execution is over. The people, stunned by such a fart, do not know how to express their indignation in decent words, but the deed is done. On the way out, Elizabeth Piest sees the little goat leaving. He smiles at her like an old friend, but she looks at him with a cursed look. The series ends with a historical note. John Gacy was found guilty of 33 murders and executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. Following the events following his arrest, The Chicago police were reformed and computerized to systematize patterns of cases from different counties. Of John Gacy's 33 victims, 6 have never been identified. They are buried in various Chicago cemeteries, and each tombstone bears the inscription, "We remember."